Delta Force. The Army won't confirm this unit exists. It won't deny it either. It just changes the subject, say the name out loud, and voices actually drop not from politeness, but instinct. And that instinct isn't wrong. Officially, it's the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, a name so boring it was built to disappear. That's not an accident. Delta was activated on the 19th of November, 1977, built by a colonel named Charlie Beckwith, a former football draft pick who traded a shot at the Green Bay Packers for a combat tour instead. In the early 1960s, Beckwith spent a stretch embedded with the British SAS, watched exactly how they operated, nearly died there from a bacterial infection doctors gave him 3 weeks to survive, and came home from that hospital bed with one idea fixed in his head: build an American version, just as selective, just as ruthless, answerable to almost no one. It took him more than a decade of fighting his own chain of command just to hear yes. Once Delta existed, it stopped looking like a military unit almost immediately. No visible rank, no unit patches, long hair, civilian jackets, beards that would get a regular soldier written up, all of it deliberate, all of it built for one purpose: disappearing into a crowd in Beirut or Bogota without anyone giving them a second look. Getting in is its own kind of war. Land navigation measured in days instead of hours. Sleep deprivation stacked directly on top of physical exhaustion. Psychological evaluation calibrated so precisely that most candidates quit long before anyone actually tells them they've failed. The ones who survive selection become operators in hostage rescue, direct action, and counterterrorism at the highest tier the U.S. military runs. Their name is attached to Mogadishu in 1993, attached to years of hunts for high-value targets across Iraq and Afghanistan, and attached, almost certainly, to a dozen other operations that will never appear in a headline, because Delta has never once needed the credit. What Delta needs is a target list and an aircraft that can get there before sunrise. Which raises an obvious question. If the Army built a unit like this, what did the Navy build to match it? SEAL Team 6. Officially, it's the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, DEVGRU. Unofficially, everyone just calls it SEAL Team 6, and that name is one of the best pieces of misdirection in modern military history. When the unit was created in 1980, the Navy only had 2 actual SEAL teams in existence. Commander Richard Marcinko named the new one 6 for exactly one reason: to convince Soviet intelligence there were 4 SEAL teams out there. Nobody had found yet. The lie worked so well, the name simply never got corrected. Decades later, long after the real numbering caught up on paper, the world still calls it Team 6. DEVGRU sits at the exact same tier as Delta, the most classified, most sensitive missions the country runs anywhere on Earth, with one specialty stacked on top: the ocean, boarding hostile vessels mid-transit, diving into blacked-out harbors in total darkness, striking from the water in conditions most people would call suicidal. But the mission that put DEVGRU in every history book happened entirely on land. The 2nd of May 2011, a walled compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. 23 operators inserted by helicopter in total darkness, inside the borders of a country that had no idea they were coming. Operation Neptune Spear ended a manhunt that had lasted almost a decade, and it ended it in under 40 minutes. By the time the rest of the world found out what had happened, the team that did it was already gone, already airborne, already halfway home. That's the entire DEVGRU reputation compressed into one sentence. They finish before you even realize they started. But here's the thing worth remembering before we move on. Not every SEAL wears that DEVGRU patch, and the ones who don't are still more than capable of standing on this list entirely on their own merit. Navy SEALs. The regular Navy SEALs are the most publicly recognizable brand in special operations, the ones with the memoirs, the podcasts, and the 4:30 a.m. wake-up call. They will absolutely find a way to mention whether you asked about it or not. SEAL stands for Sea, Air, and Land, and unlike most military branding, that's not an exaggeration. These operators genuinely fight across all three environments, sometimes in the same mission, sometimes in the same hour. Getting there runs through BUD-S, Basic Underwater Demolition, SEAL training, a 6-month program where the attrition rate regularly climbs past 75%. At the center of it sits the single most infamous stretch in American military training, Hell Week, 5.5 days of continuous operations, roughly 4 total hours of sleep across the entire stretch, surf torture in freezing water, carrying rubber boats overhead until your arms simply stop taking instructions from your brain, while instructors stand a few feet away holding hot coffee, waiting for the bell that means someone just quit. And that's before a single SEAL has deployed anywhere. Once they do, the resume fills up fast. Direct action, reconnaissance, counterterrorism, unconventional warfare in Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, the Philippines, and plenty of coordinates that will never appear on an official map. Here's the thing that training is actually built to test, though. It's not raw toughness. Every phase of it is designed to answer one specific question before anyone ever gets shot at. Will this person keep making good decisions once their body is completely done arguing with them? BUD-S doesn't measure strength. It measures what's left standing after strength runs out entirely. And that exact question, what happens the moment a mission needs speed instead of patience, is where the next unit on this list lives permanently. 75th Ranger Regiment. The 75th Ranger Regiment, Rangers Lead the Way, isn't a motto painted on a wall somewhere. It's a literal, operational standard. A Ranger battalion can be notified, packed, flown across an ocean, and breaching a door within 18 hours of the phone ringing, not as an ideal, as a requirement. 3 active duty battalions, plus a regimental support battalion, rotate through a permanent alert cycle, which means at this exact moment, somewhere, a portion of the regiment is standing by with bags already packed. Ranger School is its own separate, brutal institution, 62 days of caloric deficit and almost no sleep, built to answer one question: can you still lead a squad while your own body is quietly shutting down underneath you? Soldiers from every branch attend Ranger School without ever joining the regiment itself. That's how much weight the tab carries entirely on its own. Actually earning a slot in the 75th requires its own separate selection process, stacked directly on top of everything a soldier has already survived just to get there. These are professional raiders, airborne insertions, air assault, urban breach work, rehearsed so many times it stops being a skill and starts being reflex. If a target needs to be hit tonight, not next week, tonight, this is the unit that gets the call. Speed like that solves a lot of problems fast, but not every mission on this list is about speed. Some of them are about something slower, and honestly, harder to master. Green Berets. Green Berets. Say the name out loud in the wrong room and something shifts. People get quieter, more careful with their words, because they're never entirely sure who's listening. Officially, they're U.S. Army Special Forces, a name so plain it almost sounds like a deflection. The Green Beret itself was authorized in 1961 by President John F. Kennedy, who called it a mark of distinction and a badge of courage. The hat became so iconic, it swallowed the unit's actual name. Nobody says, Army Special Forces Operator? Everybody just says, Green Beret? Here's the twist almost nobody expects. Their primary job usually isn't pulling a trigger, it's teaching someone else how to. Green Berets specialize in unconventional warfare and foreign internal defense, a formal way of saying they parachute into a country, find the local fighters who actually want to win, and quietly turn them into an army. A single 12-man team, called an ODA, can multiply itself into hundreds of capable fighters if the mission is run correctly. That's not firepower. That's leverage. And leverage, historically, wins more wars than firepower ever has. Every operator on an ODA is a specialist in one of 5 disciplines: weapons, engineering, medicine, communications, or operations, and every single one of them is cross-trained in the others. The medic can put rounds on target. The demolitions expert can stop your bleeding. Learning the local language isn't optional either, because you cannot build a village's trust through a translator standing between you and them. Green Berets play the longest, slowest, most patient game on this entire list, which raises an uncomfortable question almost nobody asks out loud. What happens after the patient game actually ends, and someone still has to hold the peace they spent months building? Civil affairs. Picture a town 3 days after the fighting finally stops. No power, no clean water, no functioning government. The insurgents are gone, but so is everything that used to hold the place together, and if nobody rebuilds it fast, the same vacuum that started this war simply starts the next one. That's the world civil affairs soldiers walk into. On paper, the job sounds almost bureaucratic. Manage the relationship between military forces and the local population, reduce friction, support the rebuilding of governance after a conflict ends. In practice, it might be the single hardest job on this entire list because bullets are simple. Rebuilding trust in a community that just watched its own infrastructure get destroyed is not. Civil affairs teams deploy alongside Green Berets, Rangers, and other operators to stand up local governance, restore basic services like water and electricity, and work directly with local leaders whose cooperation decides whether a region actually stabilizes or quietly falls apart again in 6 months. Here's the strategic truth almost nobody outside this world talks about. You can win every single firefight in a war and still lose the entire war if the population turns against you afterward. Civil affairs exists to make sure that never happens. They're not the ones blowing things up. They're the ones building the thing that has to outlast the war itself, which, historically, tends to matter a great deal more. Marine Raiders. Now flip all of that on its head completely. If Green Berets and civil affairs are the patient chess players on this list, the Marine Raiders are the ones who flip the board over, win the fight in the time it takes everyone else to set up, and then, politely enough, help you put the pieces back. MARSOC, the Marine Corps Forces Special Operations Command, was only formally activated in 2006, making it one of the youngest units on this entire list. Don't mistake young for inexperienced. Its lineage traces straight back to the original Marine Raider battalions of World War II, the ones who ran amphibious raids across the Pacific so audacious they read like fiction even in the official record. The core building block today is the Marine Special Operations Team, 15 operators, structured almost identically to an Army Special Forces ODA. Direct action, special reconnaissance, counterterrorism, and foreign internal defense run with a distinctly Marine instinct baked into all of it. Deploy from the sea, deploy fast, and fight with whatever gear made it off the ship, because resupply might be days away. Take that mindset and run it through a special operations selection pipeline, and the washout rate does exactly what you'd expect. It climbs. The Marine Corps already considered itself elite long before MARSOC ever existed. The Raiders are simply proof that elite still had room to grow, and the rest of the Corps, for what it's worth, agrees completely. Every unit so far on this list exists to take something: ground, a target, a compound, a network. The next one exists purely to bring someone home. Pararescuemen PJs. Pararescuemen. PJs. The Air Force's answer to a question almost nobody else in the military bothers to ask. What if your combat medic could also freefall out of an aircraft, dive into open water, and fight through terrain that would make most units simply turn around? Their motto is, that others may live, and it is not decoration. PJs insert directly into active combat zones to recover downed pilots, wounded soldiers, and anyone else the military has made a promise to bring back, a promise that sometimes means arriving on someone's worst possible day and having to be the reason it doesn't end there. The training pipeline runs close to 2 years: combat medicine, military freefall school, combat diving, survival school, stacked one after another with almost no room to fail out and start over. By the time someone earns the Maroon Beret, they're a certified paramedic, a combat diver, a military parachutist, and a small unit operator capable of fighting through a firefight while treating a patient at the exact same time. The PJ community stays small on purpose. There simply aren't many people alive who can meet every standard the job demands. The ones who do become a working definition of how much a single human being can actually be trained to endure. When everything else has already gone wrong, PJs are the ones who go get you anyway. But here's the thing about everyone we've covered so far: Delta, DEVGRU, the SEALs, the Rangers, the Raiders, even the PJs. None of them get anywhere at all without somebody flying them there first. Night Stalkers, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers. If Special Operations is a relay race, the Night Stalkers run the leg nobody ever sees, low, fast, and completely in the dark. This unit exists because of a disaster. In April 1980, Operation Eagle Claw, the attempt to rescue American hostages held in Iran, collapsed in the desert when a helicopter collided with a refueling aircraft during the withdrawal. 8 American service members died that night, and the hostages stayed exactly where they were. It remains one of the harder nights in the history of American special operations, and it's worth sitting with for a second because the entire regiment that follows was built directly out of that failure. The Army's conclusion afterward was blunt. This country needed pilots built specifically for missions like this one. By October 1981, that unit existed. Their motto says everything you need to know: Night Stalkers don't quit. They fly heavily modified Little Birds, Black Hawks, and Chinooks, stripped down, rebuilt, and loaded with terrain-following radar and avionics that turn a helicopter into something closer to a scalpel. Pilots train for thousands of hours before they're ever cleared for a real mission, flying on night vision at speeds and altitudes that would put most commercial pilots in the hospital from stress alone. Night Stalker aircraft flew the raid on the Abbottabad compound. Night Stalker crews were in the sky over Mogadishu in 1993. For more than 40 years, if a Tier 1 mission has moved by air, there's a very good chance this regiment is the reason it got there at all. They're barely known outside the community. They genuinely prefer to keep it that way and let the operators they carry take the headlines instead. Sometimes, though, the most effective weapon in the entire American arsenal isn't carried by anyone in that helicopter at all. Psychological Operations, PSYOP. Psychological Operations, PSYOP. Yes, it's a real, official military specialty. And yes, the soldiers assigned to it have exactly one job: change what the enemy believes. Officially rebranded Military Information Support Operations, because apparently the original name made a few too many people in Washington uncomfortable. PSYOP soldiers design and deliver what the military calls products, leaflets, radio broadcasts, loudspeaker messages, and now digital content, all built around a single question: what does this specific audience need to hear to change how it acts? During the Gulf War, PSYOP units dropped tens of millions of leaflets over Iraqi positions urging surrender. Entire units did exactly that, walking out with their hands raised before a single American round was ever fired at them. Training runs through a dedicated qualification course covering audience analysis, persuasion theory, cultural literacy, and media production, making this the rare special operations specialty, where the deadliest weapon is a sentence built correctly. Here's the part that rarely gets said out loud. Convincing an enemy to surrender is strictly better than defeating one. Same result, without spending a single life to get there. The pen, as it turns out, actually can be mightier. The military just keeps the sword close by anyway, for the moments the sentence doesn't land and the answer has to come from somewhere else entirely. Which leaves exactly one job left, the one every single unit on this list depends on completely, and almost nobody outside this world has ever heard of. Joint Terminal Attack Controllers, JTACs. Joint Terminal Attack Controllers, JTACs. The people on the ground talking directly to the aircraft overhead, making absolutely certain that aircraft hits the right coordinates and nothing else. A JTAC is usually an Air Force Special Tactics operator, though Army and Marine personnel can also qualify, embedded with ground forces and certified to direct air-to-ground strikes in live combat. The job, stripped down to its core: identify the target, talk to the pilot, confirm exact coordinates, clear the airspace to prevent friendly aircraft from colliding or firing on each other, and give the final word to release the weapon. Often while taking fire, often while on the move, often with half the information anyone would actually want before making a call like that. There is no room for a wrong answer here. Miscalculate, and a bomb lands on the wrong building. Miscalculate, and it's your own people standing underneath it. The certification pipeline reflects that weight entirely, one of the most demanding qualification courses in any branch. And during the height of operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, JTACs were consistently among the most requested personnel in the entire Special Operations pipeline. Precision air power on command changes the entire math of a firefight, and the people making that call tend to be quiet, easy to overlook, and absolutely essential to everything happening around them. All of it: Delta, DEVGRU, the SEALs, the Rangers, the Green Berets, Civil Affairs, the Raiders, the PJs, the Night Stalkers, PSYOP, and every JTAC calling in a strike right now is operating simultaneously, tonight, on more continents than most people could name. You'll never hear about most of it. That's not an accident. That's the entire point. The best missions in this world are the ones that end with absolutely nobody finding out they happened at all.